Zoom won't allow us to share a screen. Hopefully that's not going to work for our presenters. But in the meantime, I just want to say hello to everyone. Welcome to the webinar. We are so delighted that you guys are able to join us for our first webinar of 2023. It's going to be a really good one. So take a minute and introduce yourself in the chat. We'd love to know who's with us and where you're at. Fred, I think the chat is also disabled. Is there any way to fix that? I wouldn't worry about the slides at this point. So we'll try and get the chat fixed as well. But in the meantime, I'm going to turn it over to my friend Nikivier, who is going to tell you all about this wonderful session that is sponsored by CAFE, because CAFE is our partner on these webinars, and we are a big fan of the work they do. Hi, Nikivier.
Hi, Sherry. So welcome, everybody. As Sherry said, my name is Nikivier, and I'm a senior specialist at MEEC, and I work on the CAFE project, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about who we are. So CAFE stands for the Collaborative Action for Family Engagement, and it is our project that is a statewide family engagement center for Pennsylvania and Maryland. I think we're the only center that serves 2 states. We build sustainable infrastructure to support healthy family, student, and community engagement. CAFE serves all educators from state agencies to school districts to school staff and early childcare providers and families to promote high-impact, culturally responsive engagement. And we are delighted that you are joining us today. With that, I will turn it over.
Okay, I think that's my cue to attempt a screen share. So give me all of your positive screen share vibes. All right, I'm going to ask Jessica to tell me if you see what I'm hoping you'll see.
Got it. We're ready.
Okay, great. We're so excited to welcome you today. We're going to be talking about highly effective family engagement and 5 habits that allow you to really start now leveraging parents as partners and building strong, lasting, trusting, reciprocal relationships with the families you serve. So we're really excited to jump in. Who am I? Well, I'm Rebecca Honig, and I'm the Chief Content and Curriculum Officer at ParentPowered. So we're the creators of Ready for K, which is an evidence-based family engagement program delivered via text message, reaching families birth through 8th grade, wherever they are in their home language, with ways to support their child's learning and development. I've been creating content to engage families for over 2 decades. I spent many years working at Sesame Street, first as a content specialist and then as a writer, creating scripts and guides and books and trainings for families across the world. I've also developed dozens of family workshops and resources for places like Scholastic, PBS, and lots of others. And I've had the opportunity to lead family workshops with families across the country. And I think my favorite part of all of this work is really learning about family strengths and stories and unique perspectives. I am also the parent of 3 children. I have 1 in elementary, 1 in middle, and 1 in high school. So on a personal level, I'm getting quite a look at family engagement through the ages. And I'm joined by the amazing Jessica Webster, who will introduce herself now.
Thank you, Rebecca. I'm Jessica Webster, and I serve as a senior family engagement specialist working with the Collaborative Action for Family Engagement, with which my amazing colleague Nikivier has shared with you about our work already. But to be brief, I work with families and educators in building and sustaining effective partnerships focused on student learning and growth. So prior to joining the MAEC team in July, I led a university laboratory school through a strategic plan and realignment that focused on literacy, culturally responsive and equitable practices, staff and student diversification, student supports, family engagement, and community and partnerships. And at no time was it more evident to me that we needed family engagement than during the pandemic, when I relied very heavily on the strengths and knowledge of my families to help navigate that time and make sure that we were supporting our schools. So I've also had the honor of serving as a middle school administrator and an inclusion specialist, as well as a classroom teacher. My passion for family engagement led me to complete my dissertation that was focused on engaging families through the transitions through middle school. And like Rebecca, I too am a mom of three. I have a second grader, a sixth grader, and a high schooler. So I come today wearing both the hat and through the lens of an administrator and as a mama. And I'm so excited to be part of this conversation today. So we wanted to start with a quick question. What is family engagement? And so we'd like you to just take a moment and jot down a sentence or even just a word or phrase that sums up family engagement in the chat. I see connecting and working together. Oh, they're coming so fast. Teamwork, inclusion, collaboration, relationships, partnering. Supporting, I see supporting in there. Authentic. Oh, I saw fun. I like that too. Empowering. This is so fast moving. Awareness, accompaniment, co-authoring. What a great word. Advocating, support and guidance, engaging. Oh my goodness, so many good things here. Absolutely. Loving kids and humans. Excellent. So you've contributed so many great words and definitions. We're going to add one definition to the conversation from the National Family, School, and Community Engagement Working Group, which is now the Policy Council for NAFSCE. And that definition is that family engagement is a shared responsibility in which schools and other community agencies and organizations are committed to reaching out to engage families in meaningful ways, and in which families are committed to actively supporting their children's learning and development.
So as we just encapsulated and experienced, there really are so many ways to define family engagement, and family engagement is all of these things. But family engagement can actually also be looked at as a collection of habits. And what we mean by that is things we do every day or at a regular and reoccurring cadence that help us build meaningful relationships with families. And we find it exciting and promising to think about it in these terms because habits are defined as settled or regular tendencies or practices, especially ones that are hard to give up. As family engagement specialists, this is what we are all working for, right? We want family engagement to be so entrenched into our systems and routines that it just becomes part of existence, like drinking water, so that staff and administrators and educators cannot imagine our schools working without it. So today we are going to talk about easy ways that your administrators and educators can build 5 habits of engagement by layering them right onto the things they are already doing. So we're going to look at building the habit of reflection, building the habit of listening, building the habit of making learning visible or sharing, building the habit of partnership, and building the habit of evaluating and following up. So why did we choose these habits in particular? Well, because they are all habits that support the conditions and goals set forth in the dual capacity building framework for family and school partnerships. These are habits or daily practices that are going to lead us to create welcoming cultures, honor families' funds of knowledge, connect family engagement to learning and development, and really engage families as co-creators. And of course, 5 habits may sound like a lot, but just doing 1 or 2 of these things in a regular, systematic way has the potential to have a hugely positive impact on your relationship with families. So the first things first, we're just going to sort of step back and say, how do we build a habit? And research tells us that there are two critical first steps to making something a habit. So the first is to set a goal, right? What's that thing you want to do? And we recommend making it bite-sized. Next, research tells us that we need to create a cue-based plan. In other words, we don't want to just choose what we want to do, but when we'll do it. We want to map that thing onto a moment. So at ParentPowered, building habits is actually the cornerstone of our evidence-based approach to engaging families. And in every message set we send, we orient families around a specific skill, and we give them a way to layer that skill onto their existing routines or daily moments so that it becomes a habit. So for example, if we were to share that rhyming helps kids hear the sounds in words, which is critical to reading, we'd then suggest a way to do it during an everyday routine. For example, rhyme with the word zip as you zip your child's coat, or rhyme with objects you're using as you cook dinner, spoon, loon, moon, right? And the same can be done with family engagement habits among educators and administrators. We can layer those family engagement practices within our own work onto the things we're already doing in the classroom, so it becomes something that we do absolutely every day. So our first habit that we're going to look at in order to spark family engagement is the habit of reflection. So for families to engage, they first need to feel comfortable, right? And on a really basic level, they are asking themselves, how does this school feel? Does it feel like a place for me? Can I be a part of this school? And the trick, as you all know, is that they are likely to be forming these impressions right at the start when you know them the least. In essence, you're having to build trust, which we all know is the foundation of engagement, before you really know families. And that puts a whole lot of pressure on your early communications and first impressions. But there is this easy habit that can help, and it is the habit of pausing to reflect. We can pause to reflect on emails we're sending out, on paperwork we're asking families to fill out, and on spaces we're creating. A few moments of reflection can be really transformative. In our work reaching families all across the country, many impacted by trauma, we need to make sure we're reaching them in ways that feel good, that feel inclusive, that feel strength-based, or else they're just going to opt out of our text-based program, right? So we developed a set of reflections that we apply to everything we write, any communication we send to families. We ask ourselves, is this accessible? Is a family going to receive it? Do they have a computer? Is their voicemail set up? Is it written in their home language and at a reading level that they're going to understand? Is it easy to take in at a glance? Is it inclusive? Does it reflect a family's lived experiences and leverage their strengths? Is it doable? Do families have the background information to pull it off? Do they have the materials and the resources to do the thing that you're asking them to do? If not, how can you scaffold the communications? And finally, that question, and I posed this before, but is it strength-based? How does it feel? Is a family going to read this communications and say to themselves, that feels good, or I can do that? The next thing you want to do, because you don't want to be asking these questions in a void, is we want to picture the families in our community as we reflect. And we might call these sort of like our family representatives. So for example, we might ask these questions as we picture a family who's new to the community, or our English language learners, or a family who has a disability, or a student with a disability, single parent households, working households. We want to hold all of these family types in our mind as we evaluate our communications through these questions. So with those two pieces in place, right, the reflection questions and our families that we're picturing, the question becomes, how do we make this family engagement a habit for our educators and administrators? Well, one thing we can do is we can layer it onto the things we're already doing. For example, we can pause and reflect before pressing send on an email. right? That's your cue-based plan. Every time you send an email, pausing and reflecting. If we pause and reflect before sharing written communication with families, it can be really transformative. So we're going to look at that in action now and play it out with an actual example. Okay, so let's say we wrote this email, and this is an actual email received on the first week of school, well, but right before the first week of school. So it read, "Hello, MBE families. It was a pleasure to serve watermelon to the MBE families yesterday at meet and greet. I am super excited to get to know students more and more as time goes on and to see this spectacular staff in action. I'm sorry the weather's not looking good for Monday morning to start our day at 8:30. Still, no matter what, we'll run the traditional MBE gathering of students by homeroom with their new teachers in the back parking lot, as has been the tradition. Families who are dropping off by car can escort their child out back or meet a student arriving by bus. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out." Okay, so if we pause and we picture our families and we ask those core reflection questions, right? Is it inclusive? Is it doable, accessible? We might find that we want to change some things, right? So the first thing we might notice is we're using a lot of insider speak. For example, we're using an acronym instead of the name of the school. That might cause a new family to go, wait, who is this from? What is this about? We're also referencing events that families may not have gone to, which gives you the stress response of what did I miss? We're talking about traditions and locations, but we're not offering more details on where and what they are and how to find out if you don't know. So again, a family who's new to the school or community is going to read all of this and they're going to think, oh no, this sounds complicated. I'm not prepared, right? And all of this is distancing and stressful. It doesn't feel good. Also, for a family who can't drop their child off, they're left with no sense of how they can participate in this first day experience. The same is true for a family with mobility challenges. And then we tell them at the end, right, reach out with questions, but we don't tell them how. So for a family who feels unsure, there is actually no tangible next step for getting clarity. So we're going to look at a revised version of this that is far more accessible and inclusive. And this is a version we might create after reflecting, right? So, hello, Milton Brook Elementary School families. All right, we're going to mention that full name so that all parents recognize it. Teachers and staff are so excited to greet your students on the first day of school, Monday, August 30th at 8:30 a.m. We're reiterating all pertinent information in one place, so parents who maybe missed prior communications are going to be reminded. And we go on to say, there are lots of ways for parents and caregivers to join in on the first day too. Right? We made that shift because in thinking about families who might have obstacles to getting there, we're going to offer them different ways to participate. So here we go. You can join in person. You're welcome to drop your child off or follow behind as they ride the bus. You'll have the chance to line up with your child in the back lot and say hi to their teachers. All right. Instead of saying this is the tradition, we're just explaining what it is. Then we go on to say, click here for a map that shows how to get to school and where to park. Right. And on this map, we're going to note disability parking and accommodations. We'll also mention volunteers will be there to show you where to go and interpreters will be there too. Again, this is to give families the knowledge that they are going to be supported when they show up on that first day. Then we mention you can join from afar. We know that lots of families have important things to do at this time. If you can't come, no problem, right? We are normalizing this issue for many, many families, which is that it is not realistic to show up in person. And then we go on to say your child will get lots of support from new teachers and friends. Teachers will post photos on the first day so you can be part of it. We give a link to how to access those photos, again, providing a point of entry for a family who can't come in person. And then we go on to say, we're so excited to have your family as part of our Milton Brook community, reiterating the name so they grow accustomed to it. If you have questions about this first day, call Will at the front desk. All right. His number is 413. And again, we give the number and then we go on to say he's not only our wonderful administrator, he's a parent at the school too. If you need language support, just start the call by letting him know I need an interpreter. And this last piece is really key. When we give parents reach out information, anything we can do to scaffold that reach out, to build comfort, it can be very intimidating to call that front desk for questions, for information, especially at the start of school. So humanizing that person who's going to answer the phone can be a huge win in terms of making your communications inclusive and strength-based.
Okay, so now let's map on a practice that we all should be familiar with in schools when we think about creating a welcoming environment. And, we have necessary protocols for safety that require us to screen who is coming into our school entryways and into our school office to keep our school teachers, staff, and students safe. But we want to make sure that when we do this, that we consider making sure that that is scaffolded and welcoming and a supportive environment for everybody. So as we consider our school entry procedures and community-facing spaces, we want to think about universal design principles that would support the families that we pictured earlier from our family groups, new families, a family that speaks another language, family that may have a disability. How are we making sure our building is inclusive, accessible, and strength-based? The idea should be to design an environment in which we recognize differences without judgment. So, for example, is it evident when you pull onto your campus where the main office is located? And is it easy to understand how to buzz into the building? So you can see here that we have a very friendly forward-facing sign. Welcome to Milton Brook Elementary School. We are so glad you are here. First, please stand on the yellow feet and look into the camera. And next, press the red button to tell us who you are and the reason for your visit so we can best assist you. And of course, this should be printed and posted in the multiple languages of your community. So if you have Spanish speakers, Arabic speakers, etc., that you should make sure that your welcome sign is available in all those languages so everybody can access it. Secondly, we want to make sure that once we are in the main office, that there's someone there to physically greet you as a parent, or if there is an obvious way to gain attention if someone's in the back of the office, like a bell. If a family does not speak English, how is it that we have the ability to communicate that with the staff in an easy way? So in other words, we have a sign that says, I speak Spanish and I have a translator. And that's something that a family can point to. They'll see the sign and be able to point to it, and the office staff will know that individual is Spanish speaking and needs translation support. I noticed in the chat too that someone said Braille. Absolutely, we should have mentioned that on the beginning, that everything should be available in Braille for low vision and our families that are experiencing blindness. We want to make sure that we're assessing our space, that we're seeing it through the eyes of our families. So we want to make sure that all signage is welcoming and in positive language. We want to make sure that we're displaying that mission, vision, and philosophy, and also ways that we expect parents or welcome parents to be involved. All our displays should always include multicultural images, and families, remember that for many of our families, the front office is as far as they're going to go in the building. Buildings are not open for free roaming. And so we want to make sure that that space really captures the essence of welcoming. We talked a little bit about the I speak cards in languages that allow people to point if they need an interpreter. And I would also just plug here that I think when possible, hiring bilingual staff is an obvious way to support our families and be welcoming. But at the minimal level, we can train all our staff in very strong customer service skills, eye contact, smiling, welcoming, and school policies on registration. So for example, families experiencing homelessness, our families who are refugees, the packet of information that they need to provide for our for registration is different, and there are some things that can be exempted than we may require of our resident students. And we want to make sure that that families are not turned away because our staff doesn't know what it is that's expected or how to support these families. And then throughout the building, because we also host events, we want to make sure that signage is very clear, that is large and easy to read. Where are our large gathering spaces? Where is the gym? Where is the cafeteria? Where are restrooms that are available, so that it is easy for people to navigate the building and they feel comfortable doing so. Okay, so now that we've welcomed our families through strong and positive email communication, and we're designing spaces to have accessibility and belonging, our second habit is really building those relational trust through the habit of asking and listening. And so what we want to focus on is that relational trust is really built when people believe that they are seen and valued. And when we actively listen to others and we elicit their thoughts and their feelings about things, we tend to learn more. And that is our goal as leaders. Our motto should be that we're doing things with people, not for people and not to people. And the best way to do that is through active listening. So let's talk a minute about the skills that are needed for active listening. As a school leader, I believe, and when I say leader, I mean any adult in the building that is interfacing with students, parents, and community members. So everyone has the role of a school leader. Our job is really to be a detective in determining how we best support our families. We need to understand what they need, what they are interested in, what their concerns are, and what they care about. And the only way to do that is to gather these clues is through the skills of active listening. So we want to make sure that we're offering our full attention. And if for any reason you are unable to do that in the moment, it is very important that we show respect by being honest about that. So if I'm approached at a basketball game and I'm having a conversation with a parent and it's not a good time, it is respectful for me to say, it sounds like this is a really important issue and I want to give you the time that you deserve to make sure we solve it. So let's find a time together. Let's schedule a time that I can give you my undivided attention to talk this through with you. You also want to make sure you're using positive and neutral body language and that you're making eye contact. We want to reflect back what we hear, saying phrases like, what I'm hearing is, right? Remaining curious and deferring judgment, and asking open questions. Can you tell me more about? What would you like to see happen? Responding appropriately in ways that are candid and honest. And it is always okay to be able to explain to someone, I actually don't have that answer for you, but I know someone who does, and let me connect you with them, or let me get back to you with that information as long as we're doing the follow-up and getting back with them. So let's think a little bit about how we can cultivate the habit of active listening with things that we already have in place. You know, Rebecca mentioned that on that first communication that we sent out to families, we said, if you have a question, don't hesitate to call. And I like to call that part of our open door policy, right? We say that we are welcoming and that families can pop in with a question or whatever they need. But really having an open door means that we're transparent about who people should call, about which things, and how they should get a hold of these individuals. So families need to know, should I call a counselor if I have a concern? Do I call the school nurse? Do I directly call the principal? When should I start with the classroom teacher first, right? Each school district has different titles for different school personnel, and making sure that we outline that and that we explain that is extremely important. We also want to make sure that when we schedule meetings, that we create the habit of allowing our families to speak first, that we make sure that we have the time to listen to what they believe and what their concerns are, or their beliefs, their goals, their dreams for their child, their hopes and aspirations, that they are the center and that we're respecting the time by starting with them. And I also like to build in at least extra 5 minutes for my meetings with families. We know that we tend to overbook ourselves, and the worst thing that we can do is rush a meeting because we have to get to another one. But that extra 5 minutes also allows us time to do some team building and relationship building, where as we're waiting for people to assemble or as we start a meeting, that we have some time to really have informal moments where we can talk to the parent on an informal basis as well. Schools also schedule multiple events each week. So whether these are music related open houses, STEAM nights, athletics, morning and afternoon dismissal time when staff is out front to greet students as they come into the building, You want to make sure that you design your days to be available for at least part of these events to encourage those informal discussions, because that's where relational trust is really built. You want to make sure that you're thinking of ways to extend conversations through active listening and seeking out information, because what I have found is this is an invaluable time to figure out what strengths your families are bringing to the table that you can draw in for other activities. So if, for example, a parent that works in a daycare might be helpful if you are thinking about reevaluating your own pre-K programming in your school district and could serve on a committee for that. Parents who work in restaurants might be able to help connect you with food donations for an upcoming parent night event. Just ways that we can ask parents to be part of groups and be part of the larger programming that's happening in our schools is super important. During the pandemic, for example, I was able to draw in an advisory committee of parents who worked in public health and in the field of medicine to really help guide the work that we were doing and the policies. And they thought of things that honestly, as an administrator, I may not have thought of, that I felt our community felt really safe because they knew we had people coming in that had that expertise to help us. And I don't know everything. No teacher knows everything. No administrator knows everything. And so bringing in that expertise from outside was really, really beneficial. Now, that is all to say, it's not all rosy, is it? And sometimes conversations are difficult. When families feel frustrated, hurt, or ashamed, school personnel can feel under attack. And so we know that happens, and we want to make sure that we want to be very clear in understanding our de-escalation skills as professionals, leaning into that active listening role, even when it's hard. And I'm a huge fan of restorative practices. I think that the biggest piece of this is that the fundamental hypothesis of restorative practice is that people are happier, more cooperative, and productive, and more likely to make positive changes to their behavior when those in authority, i.e. school personnel, do things with them rather than for or to them. And that was reaffirmed actually through some work out of the Justice Collaborative of Yale, where they studied situations where individuals were interacting with police officers and being cited for speeding tickets. And what they found is that when they had voice, and when they felt they were being treated with dignity and respect, when the decision maker remained neutral and wasn't defensive, and that it was a transparent process, that there was a sense of trust, and the person may not like the outcome, but they felt comfortable in understanding, okay, the process seemed fair. And so in restorative practice, we call that fair process, right? And there are three elements to that. The first is making sure that when possible, we engage individuals in decisions that affect them by listening to their views and taking them into account, that we're able to explain our reasoning behind the decision. So we're not going into a meeting and saying, I don't know, the superintendent told us we had to do this, right? This isn't really what we want to do. And the other is expectation clarity. And that means that when we've come to a decision, that we're very clear about what's going to happen in the future based on that decision. So when we think of times where a family might be entering into extra support for their child in reading or math, and maybe participating in extra supports where they're pulled out of the classroom, part of expectation clarity will say, we're going to collect data for 6 weeks, and then we're going to reconvene to see how that has been helping that child. And we'll reconvene until such time that we feel that the child is able to go back into the classroom with these goals, right? So a very transparent process. And again, what we find is that helps create and sustain that relational trust that we're trying to build with families. All right, now on to habit 3, which may be my favorite because it is solidly aligned with the mission of schools, right? And that is making learning visible. So by building a habit of sharing with our families, we are indeed engaged with what Dr. Karen Mapp calls linking our engagement to learning. And so what we want to do is build our very strong learning cultures to deepen and extend learning. And in the process, we're also eliciting learning from home so that we're learning about the cultures and values of others and gaining a greater understanding of that learning. So we're going to do that in two ways. I'm going to start by talking about sharing the learning from school to home connection. And we know this is vital, especially when we think about those families that we started out with, I call them our picture families, right? Who may not be able or comfortable coming into school. And this may be invisible engagement. We may not know how it's landing with the families or what they're doing with that knowledge at home. But there are multiple ways that we already do this that can become pathways for making learning visible and stronger. So let's think about mapping this onto events that we're already doing. Number one, schools traditionally have an open house or a meet and greet. And when I think of a traditional open house, as a parent, I would go in, or as a teacher, I would be there, and parents would come in and I'd put a PowerPoint up on the screen possibly, and I'd go through, this is what our day looks like, this is what our schedule looks like, this is when we're going to do math, here's what we do for the curriculum, those sorts of things. Are there any questions, right, to the whole group? What if instead we focused back on linking this opportunity to learning? We make sure that our kids are part of that process because everything should be student-centered, and we create a classroom scavenger hunt. And our students can walk their parents around the classroom. We can also make accommodation then for parents who aren't able to attend by having their child film it, right? And go through the classroom and say, here's how we do this. Here's this part of our classroom. This is what my classroom looks like. Welcome to a day in our school, right? So we want to make sure that we're doing things that focus back and show what our kids are learning and how they're comfortable in the space that they're in. That also then allows teachers to have some free moments to have those informal conversations with parents as they're moving around and circulating around the space. Activity nights should be times where families can engage in activity together, take home a book, a game, or a technique to use at home. But I would also like to say that we have a lot of families that can't attend family nights, whether it's because of childcare, whether it's because they work a different shift, whether it's because they're just not comfortable in a large crowd like that. And so we want to make sure that in addition to access linguistically for those families, anything that we're asking families to take time out of their busy days to come in for, and we're asking teachers to stay after to participate in, should be important enough that we find multiple ways to get that information home to families. And so there should be something that can be provided to families who were not able to attend. Again, whether that's through video, whether that's through translated flyers, whether that's a phone call home to say, hey, we missed you. I wanted to make sure you know that this book is coming home that we worked on, and here's how we used it. Whether it's through other parents, right, that can serve as mentors and work with parents out in the community or in different spaces who may have missed the activity for that night. We also always encourage the displays of student work around the school. And remember, we said, especially in that front office area where parents mostly gather. But one of the things that links it to learning is that we have a way to explain what the objective of the activity was and what the student learned from it, from the process and what was happening. So that can be done through a QR code next to the activity or the poster, the poem, the essay that's posted, whatever it is that parents can when they're there for the basketball game, they can quickly scan the QR code and their child, they can get something written, or they can have a video that their child talked about the best, what they learned from the process, what the hardest part was, what they're most proud of, those sorts of things, or even a posted type narrative right next to the project that people can read as they come through your space. And then the other piece to that sharing from school to home is once we have met with families and we've really gathered what those goals are that we want to work with collaboratively with families on, we want to make sure that we're consistently sharing and celebrating those goals as they happen. So whether it's learning a new piece on your instrument at school, right? Whether it's meeting a fluency benchmark, writing a paragraph, speaking in front of a whole class for the first time, that we're sharing information out with our families to celebrate the learning that's taking place in the school.
All right, so Jessica oriented us around ways to promote the habit of making learning visible or sharing from school to home. I'm going to talk about how we can promote sharing from home to school. So the first thing we want to do in order to encourage parents and caregivers to share their insights and observations about their children with us is to let parents know just how much their insights matter. Let them know why it's important and how it will help. It is definitely not a given that parents and caregivers will have had a lot of past experience and encouragement around sharing insights, right? This can be especially true for parents who are new to the US and coming from countries in which family engagement was not encouraged. So we need to let them know why it matters. How is it going to help their teachers, their school, their child? So for example, early in the school year, you might orient parents around the importance of sharing insights on their child's feelings. You might, attach to the bottom of it an email, a question or a statement like, just like at home, children experience lots of emotions at school. When I know how to recognize how your child is feeling, I can better support them in the classroom. You're letting them know why their observation matters, right? And then you can follow with an invitation to share. For example, what are some ways I might be able to tell if your child is feeling excited? What are some ways I might be able to tell if your child is feeling anxious or upset? And again, these types of questions, these invitations to share with a clear statement about why the sharing matters are something you can attach to any communication you're sending home with families. But to really embed home to school sharing as a habit, right? It's not just going to be an invitation we make at the start of the year or in an occasional email. We want to look for lots of ongoing opportunities to invite parents to share. So we recommend doing an audit, right? Asking yourself, what is already going home with students on a regular basis? What are all my points of contact with parents, conferences, workshops, policy councils, and how can I make home to school sharing a part of those pre-existing routines and moments, right? Because that's when it becomes a habit. And again, we're going back to this cue-based plan. We're attaching a thing to a moment that's going to recur over and over and over again. So let's play this out with an example. So we know that homework oftentimes is going home with students on a regular and reoccurring basis. And for younger students, it might be projects and information. So on your screen, you see two twists on common homework routines. The first is that folder, right? Traditionally, it would be sent home as the homework folder. But what if you labeled it the communication folder and you put some Post-it notes in it there for parents to send in feedback and observations they have about their children or samples of things kids have made at home? This simple shift, along with prompts to engage in the practice, can really encourage parents to get in the routine of sharing with you. Or you might consider sharing or embedding a sharing moment at the end of homework assignments for parents to share observations about how it went or observations about things they noticed. So for example, this assignment took, fill in the blank minutes to complete. As my child worked, I noticed, and they can log some observations. You just, of course, as with all communication, want to make sure you translate this sentence frame into family's home language. And if it's not an option, you might include visuals so that you're easily able to grok families' responses even when you don't speak their home language. For example, you might include feeling faces so parents can circle the face that shows how their child seemed to feel as they did the assignment. Now, another thing that's just so critical and to keep in mind is that the more we can encourage parents and children to build the habit of communicating with each other, right, the more parents and caregivers will have to share with us as educators. So towards that end, and I'll just cruise through this and we will give you all of these afterwards, we've created a set of resources that you can send home with families. And again, we'll give you links to these afterwards, but they include prompts for open-ended questions to ask after school and sparks for having conversations about students' work, as well as ways to reach out to the teacher and engage around your observations. And then finally, we'll be giving you a link to a resource all around strategies for being an active listener. And this is targeting parents of adolescents so that kids are encouraged to keep sharing even as they move into this adolescent phase where they may be more hesitant to open up to families. We want to keep those communication lines open. All right. So as all of you well know, the ultimate goal of parent engagement is partnership. So our fourth critical habit here is the habit of partnering. When you step back and think about a really effective partnership, I find this like so interesting, right? We want to ask ourselves, what unique role do we hope parents will play within this partnership, right? Because in a partnership, each partner is most likely doing something different. And we want to make sure that we're asking parents to do things that really leverage not only their strengths, but also their unique relationship with their child. And to get at what those skills are, it helps to ask ourselves some questions. We're really into these reflective moments, of course, because we're centering ourselves in our families. So some of these questions are, and again, these are all going to help us vet skills through a parenting lens. What skills are a great match for home, right? We might ask ourselves, well, what skills might I ask a parent to focus on that complement what I'm doing in the classroom? Or what are some skills that parents and caregivers are really well positioned to build at home? We always want to be asking what skills and practices map onto their daily routines, what is going to really leverage their strengths and their unique relationship, and what's going to be doable, right? Finally, what's a parent or caregiver going to get out of it? Because ultimately, when everyone feels the gains, it becomes something that is much easier and more, and also families are much more motivated to do again and again and again. So let's play this out. And I thought we could play it out in middle school, right? In middle school, research has shown that students often do less well when parents offer direct skill support, right? So when they, in this partnership, are doing or attempting to do exactly what teachers are doing in the classroom, right? And there are many reasons behind this, but one of the key ones is kids, the frustration tolerance goes way down, and parents' frustration tolerance goes way down, and that doesn't end well for anyone. So in thinking about how parents can partner to support math, for example, we aren't going to ask them to teach slope intercept at home, right? You've got that covered in the classroom. I know if I got that request to help with slope intercept at home, I would go into a total panic. I am not well positioned to support that skill, but I can guide my child in setting up a strong math routine. You know, I can notice my child's efforts and call it out, thus helping my child to build a growth mindset. I can be an active listener as my child talks about things that are going well in math and things that are hard. Or I can help my child formulate questions they have about math and encourage them to reach out to the teacher with those questions, right? So if we imagine parents played this role within the partnership, kids are going to be more organized. They're going to be more able to bounce back from frustration. They're going to be more likely to self-advocate, all because a parent has really leaned into their strengths and their unique role within that partnership. All right, Jessica, you are up.
I'm muted.
Okay. I thought that might be happening.
So continuing with that whole concept and theme of how we engage with our children from home developmentally in different ways, from our youngest learners all the way up through getting ready for graduation from high school. We can look at the way that we use homework to do that and think about using homework as a means of partnership. So when I think about homework, I know that I worked in a school where a few of my teachers wanted to adopt a no homework policy. And I remember being in a car going to a swim meet with a couple of my friends who are not educators And we were talking about that because they were feeling very frustrated about it and were very opposed to their children not coming home with homework. And so I began asking some questions. Tell me more about why you feel that way. What are your concerns? And my friends articulated to me that one of the reasons that they felt strongly about their children having homework was that was feedback, that was one piece of data source that they could look and see, how are my kids doing independently? How are they grasping the content that's being delivered in school? And what is the content being delivered in school, right? And that was their way into that classroom and understanding how their child was doing. And so when we think about communication, there are things that we can use to enhance that ability to use homework actually as a communication and partnering tool. So when we think about this, we have an example assignment that we posted up here that would be a table with animal, plant, and human that said, list 3 different ways animals, plants, and humans adapt to their environment, and then explain in your own words the meaning of structural and behavioral adaptation. Now, this could be probably a 4th grade through middle school science homework assignment that could come home. But if we took a moment and we really thought about this and bringing in those family partnerships, right, and also enhancing families' funds of knowledge that they have in real life experiences, which we're always telling teachers we want them to help students connect to, families can actually help us with that. So we could ask families questions like, ask a trusted adult about a time that they had to adapt, right? Because adaptations can be behavioral, structural, or environmental, right? We could have the student, as part of that homework, have to share out with a trusted adult what their understanding of these events, right? We can scaffold the homework so the family understands what the objective of the unit is, what the student's learning, and also make sure we give an example in each of those categories. So I, as a parent, can look at that. I might not understand or be super confident in that ability, but I'll know my kid is going in the right direction and putting the right things in place when I see what the example is under animal, right? So those are just some ways that we can think about partnering. And then you'll see at the bottom, another way to elicit that feedback is the thumbs up, thumbs down on the assignment, and also gathering some data on how long it took the child to complete that assignment. So we can gauge on length of assignments, how students are doing independently and competently with assignments at home, which informs our work as teachers as well. All right, so conferences and workshops, which are things that happen all the time in schools, are other ways that we can make sure that we're partnering. And by turning our conferences into not parent-teacher conferences, but parent-teacher student conferences, even at a young age, which once again focuses on our children. To come to this, I actually left the PTA webinar that was going on, and one of the presenters there said that she was talking to a teacher, and the teacher said, I don't actually know the most about my students in October. The person who knows the most about the students that's sitting across from me is the parent and the student themselves. And so she flipped her conferences into family conferences, which I thought was timely for the conversation that we're having today. But having a goal setting meeting where we help families understand the data and that we come up with goals and hear the hopes and dreams of the family and the child for the year, and what role each person can take in those things. So going back to what can families do that maps on to things that they're already doing. If it's a child who's in the beginning reading stages, saying families can do this rhyming game with their children in the car, and at the daily conference, you practice it real quick, and then that becomes part of the activity that the family is doing to meet the needs of the goals. That can be some powerful partnership right there, and individualized. We also provide a lot of workshop for families on our curriculum changes, school safety issues, especially when we get up into the upper grades, on vaping and cell phone usage. And this too is another time to partner. So research tells us that when we overuse PowerPoint presentations, screens, poster paper, sticky notes during meetings, that sometimes these tools can be counterproductive because they put a distance between the presenters and the participants. So the other thing we know from research is that parents really desire an opportunity to build community and talk with each other, to digest that information that they're learning about vaping collectively as well as individually. And so making sure that when we are hosting these workshops for families, whether it be about the reading, new changes to the reading curriculum and some skills that we want our children to have, or whether it's about cell phone use with our teenagers, building in time for parents to talk to each other and facilitating conversations is an effective strategy for family engagement. Another thing that we should do real quickly is just make sure that we're asking parents what topics and sessions they need, and can any of them help facilitate that information for our families, because parents are very knowledgeable and have information sometimes that would be helpful. All right. Habit number 5. No matter which habits or tools you're incorporating, you are less likely to stick with those habits if you're not seeing results. And so it's the same thing with the workout plan, guys, right? If I'm stepping on the scale and the scale says the same thing every time, I'm probably less likely to stick with that diet or that workout plan I had going. So we want to make sure that we're ending with the habit of evaluation and follow-up. Continuous improvement is we need to make sure that we're collecting data from our stakeholders all the time and determining what's working, celebrating what's working, and then tweaking those things that aren't working. So if we're investing time and energy and resources in this, it's extremely necessary that we evaluate that impact. So we already have tools to capture some data in more informal ways that we already do. First one is making sure that we take a moment to follow up with our families. As an administrator, when I get a phone call and a parent has a concern and I'm following up with that with a child or a teacher, I want to make sure that I take a moment and in my own calendar, a couple days later, a week later, 2 weeks later, mark a reminder to myself to follow back up with that family to say, hey, I took care of this for you. Did it solve the problem that you were having? Or did you get the answer you needed from the teacher or from central office or whatever it is? But marking that follow-up, because we get very busy. And so it's difficult to remember to do those things when other things keep piling up on our calendar, but we should use the technology that we have to scaffold that response for ourselves. We also want to make sure that we have quick feedback loops on assignments. We've talked about that one already with homework. How did it go? How long did it take? And then when we talked at the beginning about having that front office customer service training and really making sure that our front office is welcoming and our programming is welcoming, making sure that we have front office feedback QR codes, kind of a suggestion box, a how are we doing opportunities so that families can give us some feedback on what's happening. Another thing is we often take attendance and ask people to sign in when we have an event. And so this is a great way to analyze, this is perfect informal data, who's there and who's not there, and making sure that we're providing information to the people who aren't there, maybe doing a little bit of digging informally to find out why they're not there. Are there barriers to not being there that we can address for future events that are coming up? And the last thing is I'm a huge advocate for family and community advisory councils. You know, Facebook and social media are places where parents tend to linger and gather and ask questions about things that are happening in schools, right? They're not always coming to the school with those questions. And so if we are building very strong community and family advisories, they can inform us on what they're hearing at the playground or the local library or at their religious church or their religious services and community gatherings outside of school or on social media. What are people asking about? What are families talking about? What are they worried about? What's happening in that community so that we can stay on top of that, not in a punitive way, but so that we're able to proactively address barriers and needs in our community and provide communication that's transparent and helpful for our families.
And lastly, as a feedback gathering loop, we can use surveys as a tool for gathering family feedback and assessing the effectiveness of our family engagement efforts. We love the survey. A couple tips to designing a survey. So for any survey, you'll want to start by defining what you need to know, why you want to know it, and finally, how are you going to use the information? By reflecting on these three things, you're ensuring that you're getting valuable, usable feedback. Feedback that's going to affect decisions you make. And this piece is really critical because if parents and caregivers are going to give you feedback, not just once, but in an ongoing and meaningful way, they need to know that it matters, right? Also, asking yourself these questions is going to help you decide what type of survey question to ask. For example, if you need information that's going to help you decide what topic to address in a family engagement workshop, you might survey families with a multiple choice question. For example, you want to learn more about supporting literacy at home, navigating hard moments with your child, how we teach math at school, or backyard science, right? But if you need more qualitative data, more stories and nuances, you might ask an open-ended question like, if you had already decided, say, for example, to host a math workshop and you wanted to decide what topics to cover, you could ask families, when it comes to how we teach math at school, what are some questions you have? That's going to give you a lot of stories and more nuanced information from families. After you gather your data, let parents know how it informed your decision making. For example, thank you so much for answering our workshop survey. Based on your feedback, we learned that 75% of parents want to attend a workshop on math. So on May 4th, we're going to invite you too, right? So we're just letting them know that they made that happen. Their decision, their feedback mattered. In all of this work, inclusion counts. You want all parents responding, especially those that are traditionally hardest to reach. So your decisions reflect all families and not just those families that are most used to having a voice. So translate your surveys, level your text. We target a 3rd grade reading level for everything we create. Short sentences, always go for a period instead of a comma. Avoid that education jargon that we love so much. And finally, enlist your staff in talking to families about why their feedback matters and consider leveraging your community. Can you survey parents in the places they're already going, in their faith-based organizations, on the sidelines of a sports game, at the laundromat, at the park? These are all places where you can find families and meet them where they are at. And it's through these ongoing feedback loops that you're going to learn more about your family engagement efforts, more about how families feel. And here's to all of us getting feedback like we have up on screen right now. And we truly believe that, again, to recap what we've covered, that these 5 habits are really going to make a powerful impact on your family engagement habits: the habit of reflection, the habit of listening, the habit of making learning visible or sharing, the habit of partnership, and the habit of evaluating and following up. And we have come to the end of this presentation. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. You have been such an incredible group of people to get to spend time with. We wanted to open it up for Q&A, but I know we're at time. Sherry, tell me what to do. We're happy to stick around if y'all are. And I don't.
Yeah, the webinar was planned for an hour, so some people have had to leave us. We've lost a few already, but if you have a few more minutes and can respond to a few of the questions in the chat, I think it would be really helpful. And then we're going to share a survey link at the end so people can give us some feedback. Hopefully it's not all going to be about the hacker that destroyed our chat today, but we would appreciate feedback from you. And there was a question in particular in the chat box or the Q&A box that I was hoping you could address, because this is a question I've actually heard from other people. And it was specifically about the study that you referenced about middle school or high school families helping with homework being sort of counterproductive. Can you talk a little bit more about that research?
Yeah, and I'm happy to share out the research study. And there have been several studies, but one in particular that I was referencing. So it was around homework practices and the difference between offering direct support. So in other words, a parent getting right in there and trying to help a child solve a problem, or offering, guidance directly related to that skill. So a couple things were at play that diminished the child's capacity to be successful with that assignment. Again, the first one was what I referenced. So research shows that children, especially at this age, when they're craving independence in adolescence, right? They're working towards increased independence and autonomy. So when a parent steps in and begins offering that level of support, it doesn't match with their developmental needs. So their frustration level goes way down, and family's frustration level goes way down. It's also can be extremely sort of activating for parents to feel that there's a concept that their child is working on that they themselves don't understand or can't quite remember how they did it when they were in school, right? Because it kind of disrupts that dynamic, that sort of position a parent is usually in, of knowing or of having authority. So those are two things at play. The other thing is, we've had some generational shifts in how things are taught. And so oftentimes a parent will then go to assist a child, and the child will say, we're not doing it like that. That's not right. I don't know if you want to share any insights, Jessica, because I know this was the focus of your dissertation.
Right. I think that when, there's also a couple things, the couple questions that I was looking through that talked about what if we don't give homework? And so another really good thing to think about is just how are you communicating what's happening in the classroom, and going back to what you expect parents, or what would you like parents, caregivers, it doesn't really matter who it is, right? Who's going to be, if it's a parent or grandparent, whatever, but like questions that they can ask. Here are 3 questions that you can ask your child, that we're going to be focusing on today. One of the things that Steve Constantino talks about is making sure that our newsletters talk about what's going to happen, not what already did happen. And so just a very quick, middle school and high school teachers should be sending home information to families to say, here's what's upcoming, not just here's the upcoming test, but here are the concepts that we're learning, and here are some things that you could elicit or connect some knowledge with your children. Another thing is that the research actually really shows that it another way to put that is academic socialization, the importance of that with our families, that in middle school and high school, that if we show families like what we want them to do to support us, right? It's not just volunteering in the classroom or sitting with your kid when they're doing their homework, that they understand adolescent development, that we help them with that knowledge, that really academic socialization is the key successful strategy for parents as students move through middle school and high school, for many of the reasons that Rebecca mentioned. But it's that idea of how we can help parents know to verbally support education, the importance of it, help them talk to their own children. We talked about communication, hopes and dreams, aspirations, the value of education in general, those sorts of things.
Fantastic. Thank you. Really, really helpful stuff. One final question. So ParentPowered is an amazing organization, and I know they do a ton of work around communicating, especially with the Ready for K program, which is one of my favorites. And I know you also have a middle school program now. Do you have future plans to work in high school, at high school level?
We were just talking about this today.
Hey,
it's definitely on everyone's minds. I will say that.
Fantastic.
And Sherry, I did want to just sort of address, someone is mentioning, what if parents have trouble understanding how to help, and that it says helping children can be an issue. Adult literacy is real. So this is absolutely, I just wanted to surface this, and this really comes back to what is the strength-based point of entry for a family? Because yes, it may not be even reading aloud to a child. I can give you a very concrete example. The first literacy related message to book sharing that families, this first support we give families in approaching book time is we say, it's okay to read in any language you like. It's okay to make mistakes. You can read just by describing what you see in the pictures. It's your voice that makes books special, right? If we are looking through the lens of the parent and saying, what is that strength-based point of entry? Is it asking a child questions and making up stories about things you see around you and putting that book down? Is it sitting with your child and just being available to listen as they talk about what they're learning or teach you how to do what they're learning? We all know that talking about learning out loud, right, is one of the highest forms of displaying learning. So again, it's finding those skills that parents can approach from a strength-based perspective. Jessica, I don't know if you want to toss anything in there.
No, I think that that's it. And we also have a lot of technology for reading books, right? So if we're providing books to our family, can we provide a YouTube read aloud, right? So that they can sit and look and turn the pages with their child while someone else is reading, right? So, I mean, there's lots of opportunities. We have the ability to really support literacy, even for some of our families that struggle with that.
Yeah, awesome. You guys, really appreciate your hard work in this area and sharing everything. You know, you're not just beautiful, you're talented, and we all got a lot out of the conversation today. I apologize to everyone who was disturbed by the hacker that logged into our chat and ruined that, forced us to turn the chat off for everyone because there were some really good comments in there. But I would like to let everybody know that we are going to share this with NAFSCI members. So if you're not yet a member of NAFSCI, please consider joining. Here's how you can join: by scanning this QR code today. And feel free to reach out to me at wilsons@nafsci.org. If you're in Maryland or Pennsylvania, there may be opportunities for you to be included as a NAFSCI member through the work that we do with Cafe and their awesome program. Also, I would like to let you know we have a National Family Engagement Summit. This year, we're going to Kansas City. I hope all of you can join us there. It's going to be a lot of fun. Registration will open for early birds on March 20th. So keep that date in mind, write it in your planner now. You don't want to miss it. And then finally, we have a link for the evaluation. If Nikivia is still here, I'll let her share that with you. Or we'll just put this on the screen right now, and maybe she had to leave as well. Here's the link. I think, Nikivia put it in the chat box.
I put it in there, sorry. It was queued up. I just didn't press enter. I'm sorry.
No worries. Thank you, everybody, for joining us and having patience with us as we dealt with the hackers. Thank you, ParentPowered and Cafe, for not just being here today and being a part of this webinar, but all of the work that you do, which is incredibly important and really helping lots of families. So everyone else, wonderful to see you. Have a wonderful day. We'll be back in a couple of weeks. We have a fatherhood webinar coming up. We'll be sending out information about that soon, so look for it. And we will see you later.